Oh, did I drop out there? Oh, what happened? Belief in supernatural.
So we have cultural superstitions like
people will say if you see a black cat, it's bad luck, and if you walk under a ladder, which makes sense, you might get hit on the head, but it's superstitious for most people. So the definition is a widely held but irrational belief in supernatural influences, especially as leading to good or bad luck, or a practice based on such a belief. So in that list of things is magic, delusion, witchcraft, story, myth, legend, old wives' tale, spiritualism, conspiracy theories. Those are all superstition, could come under superstition. So it's irrational belief in something supernatural that's good or bad.
You've got 10 minutes left, Emma. I don't know if you want more time.
Yes, probably, if everyone's okay with that.
That's fine.
As a side point, it's interesting when people bring their superstitions into God, and so they believe that God does certain things, and they impress whatever superstitions they have as an attribute of God. And without example, but that happens.
So say that again. So whatever supernatural impressions they have is
bring that supernatural belief, superstitious belief, or whatever it is, and then attribute it. So they accept God now, and they say, no, it's actually God doing this, but it's still the same superstition or whatever belief that they held before accepting God. So they then believe that it's God doing this thing. Yeah.
So do you think that's connected to similar to what we were doing last night? We were looking at the story of Jonah, and we were saying about casting lots and laying fleeces, and wondering if those were kind of cultural heathen practices which had been adopted by, and how actually God-given they were, casting lots and fleece kind of laying, like, because it goes back to kind of signs and wonders. And I think people, if they do have those kind of beliefs and they come into God, they use the same kind of mindset. So we carry our culture into religion and say, oh, let's cast lots now to see who's going to be the disciple, or to carry on those practices, thinking that that's how God will serve him. Is that
difficult though, because we see it, don't we, with the disciples?
Say it again, Natalie. Sorry.
It's difficult because we see it with the disciples, with Matthias.
Yeah, so I'm not necessarily saying casting lots was, but
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. It's not God's way, but isn't it? It's difficult when we see it happening, don't we? I think God has to just work with them, like we said last night.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of goes along with it, almost allowing them to have a king. He knows it's not the best. He tells them it's not the best. They want it. Okay, go ahead, do it. I'll still work with you on it. So he works with them by picking the king. He's like, well, you gave him to us. He picks someone he knows they're going to like looking at. It's all about physical outward attraction. I wanted to bring something else up about superstition there, that some of those things we just read, the magic, delusion, witchcraft, old wives' tale, that a lot of that bondage is sexism as well. We see sexism right there, because witchcraft, witch is a female, old wives' tale, it's a woman. This negative kind of connotation on believing foolishness. Even the Bible talking about silly women being led astray by fables. It's very sexist. And even the Virgin Mary is sexist, because they're going there to worship this woman. Why is she powerful? And I don't know if people can remember what we said last time. Debbie, why is the Virgin Mary powerful? What is she?
A woman.
She's a woman, but why is she's what?
Mother of God.
She's the mother of God. Okay, so she's seen as having some place in giving birth to God. Well, in Catholic terms, we say mother of God, we say mother of Jesus, but at the same time,
they're seeing us in a sort of supernatural way, even though she's human as like anybody else, but they're still putting this, lifting her up to be this holy person, but she's not.
So they're making her out to be holy when she's not. She's just a human being like us. But what's the sexist angle on that? Why is it still sexist? Because we think, oh, that's great, it's a woman. They're actually worshipping a woman, which is good, because It's not a man. It's kind of equality, you could say. But why isn't it equality?
Because what they're worshipping in her are the fact that she embodies everything feminine,
Yeah.
like the intrinsic qualities of a woman. She's the perfect representation of a woman.
Oh,
So she's
Pure, meek, soft touch, caring.
the virgin,
Yes.
all those kind of like objectification of women, but she's this soft, caring intercessor between the wrathful God and humanity. So God is an angry apis bull figure, and she's the intercessor. So let's go to Mary and ask her to pray for us, because she can talk to him kindly and get rid of the wrath. And this is
It's the only reason it's go on.
culture. Go. No, it's all right. Carry on.
The only reason Pope Francis is bringing women into being secretaries and stuff like that, and the nuns, is because we need this woman's touch
Yeah.
in decisions and things, you know.
Yeah.
But they're different. We're different, male, female.
Exactly, which perpetuates that men by nature are sterner, harsh, disciplinarian, in charge, because God's still in charge. That's why Mary's there, because she's going between the person who's in charge, which is God, the male, and the rest of the society. Does the female softer touch. And this is widely held culture, so it just ingrains cultural sexism. So anyway, Zwingli comes and he's proclaiming liberty through the gospel to these bond slaves. So he's using that opportunity to tell them, you don't have to do this, don't worship this woman. But were they happy when he did that? Let's find out. So you'd think they'd say, oh yeah, you're right, she's got no power to heal us, let's not do this. So, but they don't, they resist. This is GC 175.2. Someone read that one, please.
is it too many listeners, that one?
Yes, thank you.
To many listeners, these teachings were unwelcome. It was a bitter disappointment to them to be told that their toilsome journey had been made in vain. The pardon freely offered to them through Christ, they could not comprehend. They were satisfied with the old way to heaven, which Rome had marked out for them. They shrank from the perplexity of searching for anything better. It was easier to trust their salvation to the priests and the Pope than to seek for purity of heart. Oh, gosh, they're stuck in it. So that they wanted to hold on to the traditions, really. They didn't want to let go of it, did they?
No. So they're upset. What does it say? Bitter disappointment. So they've got this bitter disappointment that their journey had been made in vain. They've come all this way to worship this woman who they think is going to liberate them from their problems. And this pardon is offered freely. You know, they don't have to come all this way and do all this penance to get their sins forgiven. All they have to do is accept Christ. And Zwingli's trying to tell them, you've got pardon offered free through Christ, and they didn't understand it. So, and you just said they're satisfied with their traditions. So it says they're satisfied with the old way to heaven, which Rome had marked out for them. And why are they satisfied with that, Debbie? What does it say?
Because they shrank from the perplexity of searching for anything better. I think that's the reason why. Because they, you know, like that, there's a thing in the Bible that's saying that, you know, that you can get to heaven through a different way. And I think they were satisfied with that. They didn't want to search for anything better, because they just didn't. They didn't want to let go of their traditions and their beliefs. They were adamant what they believed in was the truth. It's a bit like the SDA Church, very reluctant to, you know, come away from their traditions, come away from the great controversy. They've got the truth and they're satisfied with that.
And the reason is, in the last sentence, why?
It says, they said they shrank from the perplexity of searching. They didn't want to search for anything better. And it said it was easier. It was an easy way to trust their salvation to the priest and the Pope. So that's where they were putting their faith, and they trusted in the priest and the Pope.
And what was the perplexity of searching? Why was that so difficult? What does it mean, the perplexity of searching?
It's almost like they didn't want to bother knowing the truth. Or
complexity, I mean, it's complicated, it's intricate, it's a puzzle, it's baffling, they
didn't really want to go through that process, did they? It was easier just to accept what they had.
Yeah, I think it's that the key is it was easier. to
Yeah.
transfer salvation to the priests and popes and to seek the purity of heart. So what the old way to them is easier. It does require a cross. They've made this long, toilsome journey, but that cross is one they're prepared to take. And it's easier for them to trust in other people telling them than it is for them to find out for themselves. So I don't know how would you make application today then? So they've gone all that way on this journey. They've believed a certain thing, and someone tells them at the end of it, this is not right what you're believing. All you need to do is do this. This is the change you need to make. You need to search for salvation through Christ and accept his pardon freely without doing this, what you're doing now. And
I think with regards to liberty, you were talking about liberty up there and being and us having the right to think for ourselves and all the rest of it. They're not really doing that, are they? Because whatever thoughts their Pope and priests are thinking, that's their thoughts. So they're not really practicing liberty either, are they? You see
no,
what I mean? If I'm right in saying that.
yeah, no, they're not. They're under bond. What's their bondage then?
The authorities following them. I don't know, under them. They're
Yeah.
bound under them, aren't they, really?
They're bound by the viewpoint of the priest and pope. So they're believing another man's version of things. So
Yeah.
what don't they want to do?
To give themselves liberty to think for themselves.
Which is what? Take responsibility?
Yes, I
So
don't.
don't want to take personal responsibility. I don't know how we can put that here. Let's put it at the side. Don't. Oops, this pen's not really good. Responsibility for their salvation. So I'm saying we've been on this Christian journey for some time, and it's been a long journey. It's been a bit toilsome at times, and we've thought by the end of it, we'll get the Sunday law, we'll get lifted up, we'll get some prize, some recognition, something out of it that will mean that we're saved because we're passing the test. I'm just trying to translate what they've gone through and what we go through, and then someone comes along and says, actually, that's not the way to do it. This is the way to do it. But we're satisfied with the old way. So they say, no, you're not to address God as Father anymore. We're not to do patriarchy and headship. This is all wrong. This is not what God wants. You're not passing the test by doing those reforms, being conservative, keeping Sabbath, eating vegan, whatever, all those things. That's not how you're passing the test. You're failing the test because you're keeping on to patriarchy and headship and your conservative viewpoint of things, your judgmental attitude. You've got to love homosexuals. You've got to practice equality now and change your ways. And it's easier for us to say, no, actually, I like headship and patriarchy. Let me go back to the Adventist church and just do it their way. This is what many people have done, I think. But even in our own heads, we have to now take personal responsibility for sexism in our own lives. And we're saying, actually, that's a bit difficult because it brings me into conflict with everybody. It brings me into conflict in my family, in my workplace, in my church. I'm open to loads of criticism now. This is difficult. It's easier to stay as I was before and just go with the old gospel and go with the Sunday law model because that's over there. And I don't have to take personal responsibility for it. If I just tick those boxes, I'm going to make it to heaven. And you're telling me it's not that easy. Go on.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, God says that we've got to suffer the way that he suffers. So when that reminds me of it. We all have to go through that suffering. I'm not saying, that's part of our journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is to go through this suffering if we want to become like him. And so they're saying we don't want to go through this suffering. A lot of people don't want to go through suffering because it's easier to stay with the peaceful way of life, probably. So we're saying if you do choose this, then this is the suffering that we've got to put with, like you just said, having this backlash from family, from friends, all this sort of stuff. We don't want that. We want the easier way.
Yeah, absolutely, because it involves a cross. And I also want us to see from these passages, from even the one we read about Jesus and this one about Zwingli, how many people in the passage, in both passages, are giving the message.
And how many people are listening? So Debbie, how many people are giving the message?
Message in the passage we just read.
In the passage we just read, just bear with me.
It was the passage.
To many listeners, these teachings says to many listeners. pardon freely given to them.
So how many are listening? Let's do that one. Sorry, because it was the passage before that said
It says to many listeners, many listeners.
there's many people listening, but it's the passage before where you find out who's giving the message. Who,
Oh, you mean that the 174.3, that one?
Yeah.
Oh,
who's proclaiming liberty through the gospel?
it says, hold on. Pilgrims at all seasons resorted to the shrine of the Virgin of its congregation. Multitudes came from parts of Switzerland and even from France, greatly afflicted. It seized the opportunity to proclaim. So it was all the people, it was multitudes.
No.
Hold on it. Greatly afflicted at the same. Seized the opportunity to
Who's
proclaim.
greatly afflicted? Who's greatly afflicted at the site?
Oh, it says here, hold on, greatly afflicted from the side.
No, who is the previous word before greatly afflicted?
Zingli, whatever that
Zwingli.
was.
Yeah, Zwingli.
Zwingli.
Zwingli was a reformer
Oh, was it? Oh, right, okay.
from
Greatly
Switzerland.
afflicted. Oh, right.
So how many people are giving the message?
Gosh, it's not just the one, is it?
Yeah, in this passage it's one.
Oh, right.
In this passage it's one man, Zwingli, who is preaching to many listeners. What does it say? There are several descriptions of the people. Many listeners, multitudes came. Yeah, lots of people.
Yeah, so I was going to say for Switzerland and even France and Germany.
But it's just Zwingli. At the time of Christ, who's giving the message?
Yeah, him. Yeah, I see what you mean.
And we read these stories and we blow them up and we say, wow, look at the effect of the Reformation and all these people doing this work. And it's one person giving a message to lots of people who are not accepting it. And I think we have to take that on board because we have blown these stories because Ellen White pulls out Zwingli there and he's one man by himself in Switzerland. And then we're going to go to Luther now. And Luther starts as one man by himself in Germany. And because we've written a book about him now and he's world famous, we all go, wow, he must have had such an impact at the time. But it's one man doing a work in a corner. And now we look back on it and we paint this huge history of it and we blow it up in our heads and we go, wow, look at this great work they did. They did. And it's one person. And I think that's kind of shaped our picture of our own history negatively because we expect it to be lots of people, but it isn't. They're giving the message to lots of people they're coming in contact with locally and they're not accepting it. Most of them are rejecting them. So this is not successful by our definition, I think, or what we think is success. Let's go to Luther. Now, 131.2. I don't know whether we're going to read all this. Let's see. I'll just do half of it, I think. So, yeah, we'll cut into the paragraph. I don't know, Sophie, you're able to read or not? So just to give you background, Luther had been moved by the Spirit of God to do this work, to preach the gospel, but it was with severe conflict. That's fine, Sophie's there. The reproach of his enemy, their misrepresentation of his purposes, so he'd been highly criticized by his enemies. They'd misrepresented what he was trying to do. They were unjust and malicious with his character and his motives, and it came in upon him like an overwhelming flood. He had felt confident that the leaders and the people, both in the church and the school, would gladly unite with him in his efforts for reform. And some words of encouragement from those in high positions had inspired him with joy and hope. And he thought there'd be a better day coming for the church. So he was encouraged at first, Luther was, when he first started out, because people started to accept what he was saying and support him for it to a degree. But this is where now a contrast comes as he's getting more popular. Natalie, perhaps you could read it because Sophie can't.
Yeah, sure. Is it because I don't read from the computer, I've just got it on my phone, I think. Is it
But encouragement had
131.2?
halfway through where it says, but encouragement had changed. So he's encouraged to begin with when he's preaching.
Halfway to 131.2.
Yeah. And it says, but encouragement had changed to reproach.
Oh yeah, okay, fine. But encouragement had changed to reproach and condemnation. Many dignitaries of both church and state were convicted of the truthfulness of his theses, but they soon saw that the acceptance of these truths would involve great changes. To enlighten and reform the people would be virtually to undermine the authority of Rome, to stop thousands of streams now flowing into her treasury, and thus greatly to curtail the extravagance and the luxury of papal leaders. Shall I carry on?
Yes.
Furthermore, to teach the people to think and act as responsible beings, looking to Christ alone for salvation, would overthrow the pontiff's throne and eventually destroy their own authority. For this reason, they refused the knowledge tendered them of God and arrayed themselves against Christ and the truth by their opposition to the man whom he had sent to enlighten them.
So what's the problem, Natalie? What's their issue?
You're on about the issue with they were frightened of what he was going to do. That everyone was going to go towards what he was teaching, and they would lose their power.
Basically, there's many dignitaries of both church and state. Did they understand the message? These are leaders of the church and the state government.
I don't know this history very well, but I'm assuming they did. That's why they were fearful.
In fact, it tells you there in that second sentence.
Second sentence from but encouragement.
Yeah.
Go back.
Well, sorry, I can't see it.
But the encouragement had changed to reproach and condemnation. Many dignitaries of both church and state were convicted of the truthfulness. Yeah, they were convicted of the truthfulness.
And many,
yeah. But that's why they're fearful.
It just reminds me of the Pharisees, that does.
Exactly, I was going to say that exact same thing. Yeah, it reminds me of the Pharisees. They know that Christ is the Messiah. They know the truth. They can see the truth of it, but they realize that if they accept these truths, it would involve great change, and they don't want to change. And why don't they want to change? Because they're going to lose authority. It's going to undermine their authority. They're going to lose power.
Yeah.
And they're going to lose money. Thousands of streams now flowing into the treasury will stop, and that will. And why are they worried about that, Debbie? Why are they worried about that?
They liked. Well, Christ was saying that they liked being respected. They liked. I think when they lose power, they tend to feel vulnerable, don't they? So I think they liked their high positions. They liked people bowing down to them and all the rest of it. And they were reluctant, just like the males are today. They're reluctant to let go of it. They liked their patriarchal, hierarchical sort of way of living, and it's something they were reluctant to let go of.
Exactly. And it's going to, what does the next part of the sentence when it says thousands of streams will now stop flowing into the treasury, so they're going to lose money, and thus what's the result of that? Cause and effect here.
Well, it's still power, isn't it?
The next bit tells you in the next part of the sentence.
Where was that? Their opposition to the man whom he had sent to. Which sentence are we looking at? Sorry.
Back from that, in the middle of it, to enlighten and reform the people would be virtually to undermine the authority, stop
of Rome.
Streams.
Of Rome. To stop thousands of streams now flowing into their treasury, and greatly to curtail their extravagance and luxury of the papal leaders.
So it would affect their lifestyle. So they have a very extreme, because they're going to lose money. So then they won't be able to afford the clothes, to buy the food, to be rich, basically, to have the rich lifestyle they've got. And so they've got.
That gives them the power, doesn't it? I suppose, in a way, the money gives them the power.
They lose power and money and influence with the people. And then it says, furthermore, on top of that, if they teach the people, we've just talked about the people taking responsibility for their salvation. They don't want to take responsibility, but those that do, it's not in the interest of the leaders for the people to take responsibility, because if they do, they're going to look to Christ alone for salvation, which is going to overthrow the power of the Pope and destroy their authority. Because if they don't look to these priests anymore for salvation, they're not needed. Then they're not going to give them money. They're going to lose their jobs. They're not going to be valued like they are now. For they won't have the power they've got now over people's way of thinking, and so they're reluctant to let the people think for themselves. They don't want to encourage that. For this reason, they refused the knowledge tendered them of God and arrayed themselves against Christ and his truth by the opposition of the man whom he had sent. So they opposed Luther here. So again, we see one man, Luther, giving this message, being opposed by leaders of the church and state because they can see it's going to affect their lifestyle. It would mean great changes, loss of money. People would act and think for themselves, which destroys their authority. So, and you just made that application, Debbie, that to accept equality would mean great changes in society. And how can we see that would happen? Natalie, what would, from this passage, if people accepted equality, true equality, gender equality, what would happen?
You making in our day,
Yeah.
Sunday law.
Because I know you like to do that. So you make application of this passage.
I think it depends who we're looking at, but we know that we have a white nationalist America, so they're afraid of that kind of change, that equality for all people would mean that society, the original plan of America would look very different. And that's, you know, when we look in the studies of what the big threat was and what the threat is today, we know it's to do with the minorities and stuff. And that's what it would look like today if they allowed the message of equality to overtake. That's why that 28th Amendment, you know, the equality for women never got heard properly.
So men would lose power.
Yeah, men would lose power, but it would not be the country it was set out to be. The same with Rome. They had their ideology of what it's supposed to look like, and it's the same for America and everywhere really, that because it has to go nationwide. Equality
Yeah.
Are they afraid of you losing their identity?
Yes, of course. If you only have to look at the King of the South and do parable methodology, King of the South said that Americans are ruining their way of life, their identity. So you do compare and contrast, and you can get a bit of a message from that on how America is losing their identity crisis.
Emma, we have gone over time, so how long more do you want?
Let me just see if we can finish.
We've done an hour and a quarter.
Okay, if we just finish off with Luther, maybe can I have 10 minutes?
Yes, okay.
Okay, that'd be great. It's good to know how long it takes. Okay, so yes, I think you're right. You talk about white nationalist men leading in America, and it would change the shape of that, what that looks like. So they would lose their power. Men would lose. If we make it about gender specifically, though, they would lose their power as men, not just in government, but in their homes, in their their wider sphere. And they're threatened by that they would lose their ability to control and be in charge. So I just lost the place where we were. But the other thing I was thinking is, why would they lose money? Obviously, they lose money on a personal level if they haven't got the job they had before because a woman takes it. That's kind of, but as a general scale, with gender equality comes in, where does a lot of money get made when you think of gender inequality? If we think of radical feminism.
With regards to the Pope you're talking about, or just in general?
No, the Pope. We're making application of this for that the Pope is in Luther context, that Rome was going to lose all this money because they're going to lose power over the people if they follow Luther's teachings. But if they followed our teachings today about gender equality and radical feminism, and society was prepared to accept that, why wouldn't they want to? Because we've said they're going to lose power, so the men are going to lose power, but they're also how are they going to lose money? Where's
is it to do with women, like women having children and paying them wages when they're off? And,
yes,
things like
say that. Yeah, they're going to have to pay more money out to women, but also where's a huge amount of money made in culture? I was thinking about the beauty industry, the entertainment industry, the gaming industry, sports, all those things that are dominated by men that now have to, well, firstly, they're dominated by men, some of them. So you might make more money if women do it as well. But if you take away the whole beauty industry and you take away the entertainment industry that's sexist and you take away all sexist games, you're going to lose hundreds of millions of pounds because it perpetuates, especially the whole beauty industry. Look how much money is made probably from makeup, hair dye, high heel shoes, the whole beautification of women. That is a whole massive money-making industry. And if
there's an issue, but I'm not sure if it's the threat is about that when it comes to equality. They're just misogynist, and they don't care what the woman looks like. Obviously they do, and they want them to look nice. I understand what you're saying, but it's just misogyny rooted in the disrespect for women at the root cause, and they have no respect for women at all. And they're educated, they're clever enough, whatever it is. I don't think it's money or looks. It's just to do with men have a different brain, they work differently, and they're just misogynistic. And
okay, but at the same time, I was just trying to apply the passage to say what money could be lost if they accept these changes in society. because there's a financial loss here in this passage and an authoritative loss as well. So there's two losses. And I was just trying to look at society and how we gender income and how that is affected by if everybody overnight became radical feminists. We're not going to wear certain clothes. We're not going to wear certain. We're not going to do the beauty thing. We're not going to do the jewelry thing. We're not going to do all that stuff that is to do with the beautification of women and the entertainment and gaming industry. We're not going to fund that because this is all misogynistic. There's a lot of stuff that they stand to lose if they were going to radically change, if they're going to make those changes, and it costs them and they don't want to, probably because at the root they're misogynistic, they hate women, they don't want to do anything to help women out.
But yeah,
It's more for their own gain, really, I think, as well. They're reluctant to give up the extravagance of it all. They like it. They're reluctant to give it up.
Extremely selfish at root cause, yeah.
Yeah, it is, yeah. That's all it is.
This is the gospel, selfish versus selfless.
It's quite the opposite of Christ, really.
absolutely.
I just want to I'm going to skip the next quote, which is 132.1. Actually, I didn't put it up there anyway. It's just about Luther being discouraged, that his heart suffered and he sank almost into despair. But he recognized that he needed to trust wholly in God because he couldn't rely on anybody to help him. And I think that's the place where a lot of us
Passage is that, Emma?
What's that?
Please. What passage is that, please?
That's 132.1. So it's just in here. So this is about 132.1. I was just trying to skip time. Luther alone.
And so if you're feeling discouraged, that's the passage to read, because he felt it. You know, we think Luther was a strong man.
And out there, fearless, preaching against them. When I reread this, I thought, wow, look at what he went through. He said, no one can know what my heart suffered during those first 2 years, and into what despondency, I may say, into what despair I was sunk. But he wasn't left alone in that. It's like he went through a Jacob's time of trouble. And I think we can all relate to that he sometimes doubted that God had called him, even though he knew he had, because he was so opposed by the mighty men of earth. And I'm sure everybody has experienced something along those lines when faced with
Can
opposition.
we make application to that with regards to age in Israel? There must be many that happened to. I mean, obviously we know Elijah felt like he was alone.
Yeah.
There must be other. John the Baptist thought, have I been led by God? He had doubts, didn't he, as well?
Absolutely.
There must have been many others.
Even Moses not wanting to go to, who are they going to listen to me in Egypt? We do see, yeah, they're on their own a lot. You just mentioned them too, yeah, John the Baptist. So let's go to 132.2 and 3. I think we might have to finish up to that, actually. It's taking a bit long. Oh, maybe we can just read the last sentence of that. I'll just read the last sentence of that one. Oh no, the middle of it, just the middle. Here is okay, or maybe we'll just read it. Hope for nothing from your own labors, from your own understanding. Trust solely in God and in the influence of his spirit. Believe this on the word of a man who has had experience. Here is a lesson of vital importance to those who feel that God has called them to present to others the solemn truths for this time. These truths will stir the enmity of Satan and of men who love the fables that he has devised. In the conflict with the powers of evil, there is need of something more than strength of intellect and human wisdom. When enemies appealed to custom and tradition, or to the assertions and authority of the Pope, Luther met them with the Bible, and the Bible only. Here were arguments which they could not answer. Therefore the slaves of formalism and superstition clamoured for his blood, as the Jews had clamoured for the blood of Christ. So
I wanted to also say about Jonah as well. Curtis's study, Jonah got frightened and he ran. And it happens to many prophets, doesn't it?
yes, absolutely. It's human. It seems that humanity overtakes. And we also know at the end of the world, when we talk about the saints fleeing from the death decree, it's a similar thing.
Did Luther not run then? Did he just go on and on until no one listened? Kind of.
Well, Luther went through that despondency in the first 2 years, but then he was just determined, and he hid in the Wartburg that time. So you could say he ran, but men took him there to protect him. and then we were going to read, actually, maybe we can, I know it's 5:2 if we finish by 12, how he comes out of that. Actually, yeah, we've just got the 2 small paragraphs, the same as these two, just if we finish.
I suppose it's a test that we're all going to go through, isn't it? Because it's easy to say, oh yes, well, we understand what we've got to go through. It's actually going through it at the time, and we won't know what it's going to be like until we actually go through it.
No, that's right, and are going through it.
Gone through it. Already, Jacob's time troubles already happened.
I've tasted it, going to get worse. So Debray, from this passage, that from these truths will stir the enemy, what are the things that are mentioned that keeping them in bondage, that the enemies use?
Which passage are we just reading? Because I was just at the room then. And sorry, Emma. What passage are we reading from?
In the chat, 132.3, 3,
Oh, point 3.
0.2 and 3.
Thank you.
So just repeat your question. I was having a bit of an issue with that.
So that the last sentence of, or the last 2 sentences of 132.2 and the first sentence of the next one, actually no, more than just the first sentence. What are the things that you can pull out that they're in bondage to, the people? Let's see.
Both 132.2 and 3.
Yeah.
They're in bondage to fables, are they?
Fables. Anything else? So fables.
So look, fables is one of them. They're in bondage to.
And not the next sentence, but the one after that.
The one after, well, point 3.
Yeah, the first sentence of 132.3.
Custom and tradition.
So custom. Oh, custom. Tradition. Anything else?
There isn't. Assertions and authority of the Pope.
Yeah, I was looking at insertions.
Just insertions.
To the assertions and authority of the Pope. Oh yeah, okay. So I guess that's kind of assertions of the Pope. So it's a man, traditions of men. I think that's tradition of men.
Is it human wisdom?
What did you say? Anything else?
Human wisdom, I said.
Human wisdom.
Formalism and superstition.
Yeah, slaves of formalism. So they're bondage to formalism. And what's the other one? Superstition. So we've had superstition already. So we can see that these are fables, customs, traditions of men, slaves of formalism. These are all things they were in bondage to. So this is wider than just religious things. Customs and traditions are very much to do with what's been handed down to society, the custom of the place, the time, and obviously they're applying it to we've always done it this way. Our fathers did it this way for religious purposes, but we know that customs are wider than that. That this is a cultural issue. These are things that the culture holds valuable, and we know that word culture means cult or cultivate, and it's things that people have cultivated. They love, they nurture, they nourish, and they don't want to let go of. And so they're slaves to it because they want to be. It's almost voluntary bondage, but slaves to formalism. What is formalism? What does that look like? Anybody? Okay, for speed, I think I'll just, to me, it's like the whole way that they run their services, the church services. We love it done like this. This is the way we've always done it. Don't disrupt the process. Don't start telling us that people can go home and read their Bibles, for instance. Don't because we can, because they've got to come to church and do it. This is the priest has to interpret it to them. And they liked all the form and ceremony. We've got to pay money and do indulgences and all these sort of practices that go with religion that they really want to hold on to, the structure rather than the actual substance, the faith. Superstition and fable. I think fable is similar to superstition. It's a story that's been passed down with that's probably a mixture of fact and fiction. I don't know if anybody wants to Google what fable is, but all these things are holding the people in bondage, and Luther uses the Bible to unmask those things. And when I see slaves of formalism, I think, happy slaves. People love sexism and patriarchy because it's custom and tradition. It's what we're used to, and we're slaves to it, and we're happy in that position because there's a sense of comfort with the structure that we have built around us to protect us. So I want to finish with Great Controversy 188.3 and 189.2. So this is where we'll finish with Luther. Curtis, are you there? Can you read that for us, please?
Yeah. Sorry, from without delay or with great caution?
Without delay, just hold on, I'll give some background. So he's gone into hiding, Luther, because he's done the thesis, he's got in trouble, he's gone to the Diet of Worms and testified before the people, and they know that they're clamoring for his blood, basically, from the paragraph we just read. They're slaves to formalism. They hate Luther and what he's saying. And he's been whisked away by friends to the Wartburg. He's been in hiding for some months. I think it's over a year. And now he's heard that the gospel's in trouble in his hometown in Wittenberg, and he is not going to stay there any longer because he wants to protect the people. The people are under threat, and he's got this burden for the people, which I see as equality right there. He's not bothered about himself now. He's going to go out and help the people because he just can't stay and do nothing. So carry on. So without delay.
Without delay, he set out on his perilous journey from Wartburg in hiding to Wittenberg. He was under the ban from the empire. Enemies were at liberty to take his life. Friends were forbidden to aid or shelter him. The imperial government was adopting the most stringent measures against his adherents. But he saw that the work of the gospel was imperiled, and in the name of the Lord, he went out fearlessly to battle for the truth.
Just pause there. So what does that remind you of? If it reminds you of anything?
Go.
So in the past, it's the bit where it says enemies were liberated, friends were forbidden to aid or shelter him, and the government was adopting stringent measures against his adherents. So they're not even allowed to help him. They're going to get in trouble for even helping him. So it's not their sin.
1850.
1850, that's exactly what reminded me of fugitive slave law. So fugitive slave law is extended now into the kingdom, that it's not only Luther they want to kill, but anyone who helps him is going to be in big trouble. And and yet he goes out under those circumstances. It's almost like he's compelled by God. I can't sit and do nothing in this situation because he feels so strongly about the advancement of the gospel. And I pray that each of us have that courage when the time comes or are having that courage now to say, you know what, this is more important than anything. The truth is more important than anything, even at my own personal kind of safety, which we're not at yet. Obviously, most of us aren't. Some of us are in parts of the world, actually, but not here. So just pray that we can follow in his footsteps. Yeah, carry on.
With great caution and humility, yet with decision and firmness, he entered upon his work. By the word, said he, must we overthrow and destroy what has been set up by violence. I will not make use of force against the superstitious and unbelieving. No one must be constrained. Liberty is the very essence of faith.
So what does he say here? I think as what's happened is, just to give you some background as well, that what's happening back there is people are advocating standing up and fighting physically against the Roman authorities, and he is adamantly against taking up arms. I think people took up arms and did it by force.
Yeah, I think you just described what the passage is saying, is that he won't use force against, the unbelieving or the superstitious, these people whom he's going to preach against, and that he doesn't want the message that he's preaching to be forced upon anyone. Liberty, this free exercise of, is the very essence of what he is teaching. So he's setting at liberty those people, but he won't become the oppressor now, even if he believes that his message is true.
Absolutely, amen. And I think that's a nice note to finish on, that liberty is the very essence of faith. And your point that he will not use oppression to bring about his cause, when at the heart of his message is freedom from oppression. Liberty is the very essence of faith. And that's what he's fighting for, because then they've not got liberty. The Roman authorities are oppressing them. And he's saying, no, true faith requires liberty. Let the people be free. Let the people be free to worship God how they want. And I will not use Satan's tactics of oppression, force, to make people accept what I'm saying. So just like us now, we cannot force people to accept equality, gender equality, any equality, but gender equality. We cannot use manipulation, threats, anger, violence, or all these methods that Satan employs to oppress people into believing the way he wants. And this was at the heart of Luther's gospel. So thank you very much for your contributions, everyone. And I'm sorry we're over time, but we'll pick up part 2 next time. Let's close with prayer. Dear loving God, we thank you for these principles that you have so clearly laid out before us of civil and religious liberty, and how the adherents to the gospel, the messengers that you rose up in past ages, who were singly called to stand alone and preach for you, just as many of us have been and will be called to do. We thank you for their example of courage and fearlessness in the face of opposition and persecution. And we thank you for their standing on these principles that have been handed down to us on a plate. We thank you that we live in a society of freedom, where we are free to exercise our rights and have these liberties given us, where many people in the world do not have. We praise you and thank you that the gospel is for all people to be set free, mentally, physically, and spiritually, and to be able to have rest from all their cares and labors and pains. We thank you for that promise you've given us of physical, mental, and emotional rest. And we pray that we would avail ourselves of it, even now in this turbulent earth. We thank you for the time coming when we will see your face and be able to sit down and discuss these things in person with you and with all the people of past ages. And we pray for that day. We ask that you would keep us faithful and strong, and that you would bless the rest of our Sabbath. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Can we call him stop?
Yes.
Thank you. Could we